So my name is Marvin Mutch. I actually bowed out of another event in San Francisco tonight because I heard Nancy O'Malley was going to be here. I will get into a second. I'm going to tell you the elevator version of my story, but and in that you will hear how Nancy and I are involved. I will start by telling you that back in 1974, there was a crime committed in Alameda County, and in 1975 I was convicted and sent to prison with a 7-year life sentence. And I was wrongfully convicted. At the time, Nancy O'Malley was not with the DA's office. I don't know if she was probably in grade school.
Thank you.
And it was a very different time. And so if you want to know more about the circumstances surrounding my conviction, there's a documentary. Just Google my name and you'll come up with all sorts of stuff. When I first got to prison, I am a product of the foster care system. My mother was often absent. She was in the hospital a lot. I grew up in foster care. I became a chronic runaway. That brought me into close contact with the juvenile justice system. Eventually, I was declared a minor out of control of his guardian, and I was sent to a boys' ranch in Morgan Hill, California. And I was off to the races after that. Once you're in the system, you're in the system. I didn't understand at the time that we are on the path that we're intended to be on. Where we are is right where we're supposed to be at all times. And eventually I was arrested, like I said, and convicted and sent to San Quentin prison. I was 19 years old. I went to the law library right away because I knew it was the law that put me there, and I figured if I could just reverse engineer that, I could get out. Didn't work out that way. I met another prisoner in the law library who was a member of the prisoners union. I joined the prisoners union, and I was an activist and an organizer for the first 2 or 3 years I was in prison. When that organization imploded in 1977, we took that platform and created an organization on the inside called the Men's Advisory Council. And we advocated for humane treatment and prison reform from the inside out. We asked to have elections. The warden thought that was a ridiculous contention. So we went to court in Marin, and they said that they should allow us to have elections. And we had elections. I was elected to chair the first council in the state. And now there's a council, a men's advisory council, in all 35 prisons in California. And at the height of its population, our council represented the collective grievances of 174,000 prisoners across the state. And now that they represent about 112,000 people. As a result of administrative appeals that our council started with several of the people who were suffering from mental illnesses or physical disabilities, those administrative appeals ended up in the prison law office eventually and became class action lawsuits. And it compelled the release of about 62,000 people over the course of 5 to 7 years. They're at 112,000 people now in California prisons. I tell you this because everything is connected. Those walls don't just keep people in, they keep people out as well. And last fiscal year, before this one that just completed in July, California taxpayers paid $13 billion to run 35 prisons in California. This last fiscal year, with the medical receivership, it was $20 billion to run the Department of Corrections with paroles and everything else attached to it. What we're starting to find out now is that there are certain progressive policies that are starting to seep into some of the more entrenched areas. And there are areas that have been screaming these policies for a long time and nobody's really listened until now because money's involved in those things. Nancy O'Malley's got the Jill program, others that we found that you cannot fix brokenness until you become proximal to it. You can't do it remotely. And so we all have to admit that the system is broken in some respect in multiple areas. It runs fine in some, but it's broken in most areas. If you want to fix that brokenness, you have to find somebody who's been intimately impacted by and knows this brokenness just as intimately. So if you partner up with the people that have experienced the system and know the system, they can tell you things that you're not going to know unless you talk to them. You want to know about Nosebleed, ask a man who owns one. So the meeting that she went to was called a PAC meeting. Most parole regions have these where vendors and people from the community come in. And it's a very minimal thing. It's something that is required, and so it happens. Some counties are more successful than others. Some counties have reputations of just going rotely through the motions, and others are really dedicated. To go off subject for a second, when she was talking about the exploitation of immigrants and trafficking, because I spent 41 years in prison, I am tied to the grapevine. I hear everything. The people that I represent at the organization I'm with now, we know people inside, and we talk to them every day. There are people who make it their business to abuse people and to exert power over people. And because of the federal policies on immigrants, women are so afraid, children are so afraid to report that something has happened to them that predators have actually openly said, if you want to rape somebody, rape an immigrant or an immigrant child. Because they're not going to tell, because their parents are going to get sent back to another country. So there's reasons why when you want to adopt this, get tough on zero tolerance and all the rest of that, there's consequences to that. And the consequences are these people who are most vulnerable, they have nobody to protect them or speak for them. Yeah. Old people, children, prisoners are not heard. They're just not heard unless somebody is speaking for them. So back on subject, I was in prison running this organization that is now in every prison. We got involved with everything from ADA issues to education, medical, psychiatric and psychological issues. They all have receivers now. Well, not receivers, they all have auditors that come in every year, and they make sure that people with mental illnesses are being treated right. People with disabilities have access just like anybody else in prison. People who have not been involved with the system or somebody that's been in the system, they tend to reify a person's offense and make that an attribute of the person. They may have done something heinous, but they're not heinous people. They may have done something bad, they're not bad people. And if we're to believe anything, we must believe that human redemption is possible. I've met a couple people, I will admit, that that pushed boundaries of whether I believe they could be redeemed or not, but I haven't met anybody that has convinced me 100%. Because I think once you get to that intimate part of that person in conversation, you're going to understand that there is in most cases in the prisons that I came through, you can get to the core of it. There is a lost boy in there. Mm-hmm. Every young boy that I was in foster care with, I met in prison later. Mm-hmm. The system is self-perpetuating, it eats its young. Mm-hmm. And so it's really important to get these youth programs together and get people and to try and break that off, because the likelihood of somebody going to prison if one or both of their parents have been in prison is tenfold. It's a remarkable statistic. So I came here because I do support. When I was in 2000, there was a guy writing a book about a serial killer who's on death row. And in researching the book, he found evidence that showed that he was more than likely the person who committed the crime I went to prison for. So they brought it to my public defender, who gave it to people in the Northern California Innocence Project at the Golden Gate University Project. And the USC Post-Conviction Justice Project got involved, Morrison and Forrester and a few others. And for the first 6 years, from 2000 to 2006, we tried to litigate. I was in a very bad division of a good appellate district. I was in the first appellate district, but I was in Division 3. And you could have a videotape of this back doing it, and it wouldn't have mattered. It just didn't matter. We were getting nowhere. So they decided to go through the parole board. They petitioned for the right to present an actual innocence case to the board. And in 2006, the board recommended that I be released. About a week before I was to be released, the deadline for being released, Arnold Schwarzenegger exercised his discretion to reverse the board, and I stayed another 10 years in prison.
Oh.
Yeah. So in 2016, Governor Brown, after another hearing, released me. I was getting opposition from the district attorney's office in the form of a district attorney who was probably not born or just born when I went to prison. She's very tenacious. So we were having a hard time. The board has a very difficult job. They have to try and weigh and balance public safety and the feelings of victims and their families with what is right. I mean, what is the law? What does the law say? When a person has 7 to life and he's standing before him with 41 years, what does the law say about that? What does Lawrence say about it? What is the case law, the black letter law say about what you're supposed to be doing? So they have to balance this. In my case, the victim's family came from Texas and said that they did not want me in prison, that they did not believe I was guilty of the crime, and that they could not move on because I was still in prison. They were still stuck in time. And the district attorney that prosecuted me had written a letter talking about, of all the cases, and he had tried 75 cases, juries, all to conviction. And he was a very proud man. And he said, I was a very talented and able prosecutor. And I won the case at some odds against the prosecution. He says, but this is the case of all my cases that I've had the most doubts about, and I think that you should release him, that it would be just. And so the board had a pretty easy time with it, but we still had this very good prosecutor who was coming in, and by the time she would be done with her presentation, I would be like, yeah, don't let me out. You should just send me back. That's a bad guy right there. But Nancy's office looked at everything and decided that they should not oppose. And my last hearing, I had no opposition, and Brown let me out. So once I got out, when I went to prison, there's this long and protracted period of blindness where you're groping around, you're trying to get your bearings in this very dark place. And when I became acclimated to the dark, I seen that the place was a minefield of broken lives. And they were asking me to go on this journey with them and help them fix things. In my case, because of the abuse I suffered in foster care and in my young life, you either become an abuser or you become a saver. And I happened to become an injustice collector. I did not like things that were unfair. And actually, the fact that there was so much wrong, there was so much broken inside the system. From day one, I did not have time to sit and ruminate on my own injustice. It would have crushed me, I think. So we started the organization, we started doing what we do. In 2016, I was released, and I got a job at the Prisoner Reentry Network as Director of Advocacy, which is where I'm at today. I do a lot of lobby work. I've lobbied on several pieces of legislation. One of them, which was the toughest one for me, was the felony murder accomplished legislation that pretty much says if you go out on a crime with a crime partner and your crime partner kills somebody, and you were not intimately involved in the killing of another person, then whatever the underlying crime is, that's what you're going to do time for. And then this person that did the actual homicide will do the life sentence. And there's about 65, maybe 70 women who this directly affected, who are doing life sentences and been doing decades for crimes their boyfriend or husband's committed. And so I'm not saying that, I'm not an abolitionist. I'm going to just put that out there right now. As progressive as I try to be. I mean, Jeffrey Dahmer was eating people. You got to do something with somebody who's eating people, right? I mean, you can't say there's no prison. There's no prison, but there's been people you're scared of, not people you're mad at. And that's the problem. And that's where the realization came with the marijuana laws is, do we really want to spend $72,000 to $91,000 a year on an individual because he had pot or even sold pot? I mean, do we want to do that? Is it okay to just spend $20 billion on the prison industry in California? I'm not here to tell you one way or the other. You have to make that decision. You're the taxpayers. But when you marry all of these issues together, it comes to a focus point on district attorneys and counties that are operating. Nancy O'Malley's district attorney's office stopped prosecuting marijuana cases. We stopped seeing pot cases from Alameda County years before they passed the legislation that says stop prosecuting people because somebody made the decision. Okay, we got this kid over here that was just trafficked out of a Catholic school, and we have to prosecute that person, but do we divide the resources to prosecute this guy over here who got caught with a pound of marijuana and possibly lose us other case? So 3 years ago, I was sitting in a cell in San Quentin. Well, actually, I was in a California medical facility. In 2008, the skinheads tried to kill me. They knocked me out, threw me off the third tier North Block. I guess they were trying to make prison great again or something. I don't know.
Jesus.
I was in Vacaville, and once I got out, I got this job, and we started working in lobby work, and I partnered with a guy who has an organization called Bonafide. So we're partners in that nonprofit now. And what we do is we pick up people at the front gate of prison that have been incarcerated for decades. We give them a smartphone. We take them to Target. We get them out of their parole clothes. We take them to breakfast. We get them to their parole office. And then we partner them with somebody who's in our network that has been through this. And they hang with them for 6 months on the buddy system. And in the last 3 years, we picked up more than 900 men and about 24 women. And none of the people that we picked up went back to prison.
That's great.
And we don't charge them anything. We try and get corporate sponsors. We hustle donations. I spend long nights writing grant requests and long days going out and trying to do what we can with the money that we have. And we don't ask them for anything. We do the Godfather things like, today, this is a gift on the day of my daughter's wedding, but there's going to come a time when we ask you for a favor. So if I got a guy going to Modesto, I know there's somebody in Modesto that we've helped that I can call and say, hey, can you go to Caltrain and pick this guy up and hang with him for 6 months? And they do it because it's the right thing to do. And we take them out on outings with their families. We think that it's very important to make sure that it's not legitimate to fix an individual if he still has a dysfunctional family life. And the children need to have this contact and this connective bond with both their parents. If it's just one parent, then it's just the way it is. It's a reality in most communities, but we just took them to the San Francisco Maritime Historic Park out here 2 days ago. We took a bunch of parolees and their families, and the kids had a great time. We take them to Big Sur, we take them to the beach, we take them all around to let them know that they're part of it. They're part of this community. And I think what's missing is that we have adopted a set of terms and languages that we feel that having a PAC meeting is going to fix everything in that community. It may help one or two individuals, but if you have an individual that can't fill out their paperwork, our guys from the Prisoner Reentry Network go to the PAC meetings in San Francisco and Santa Clara, and they help these guys do that. It's a brotherhood thing. Rehabilitation doesn't work because the book definition is to return somebody to a place of wellness or well-being. And most people in prison have never been to a place of wellness or well-being. Their entire life, they're born into marginalized communities, drug-addicted parents, gang-infested schools. They've never known this place you're asking them to go to. So maybe we should be habilitating people. And then when they stray, they can be rehabilitated. But until they've reached that point of habilitation and self-actualization, you are just throwing your money away because they don't know where the hell you're telling them to go. Where is this place of wellness and well-being you're talking about? I've never experienced that.